My name is Maya Reynolds. I'm 32 years old. And if you'd asked me a year ago what my marriage looked like, I would have told you it was normal. The kind of normal people don't write stories about. Rent paid on time, two cars that worked most days, a refrigerator that was never empty, a shared calendar full of boring adult things like oil changes and dentist appointments. I work in IT security, the kind of job where you learn to see risk before it becomes damage. I've always been like that, careful, methodical, allergic to surprises. I make a decent living, not private jet money, but stable, enough that I believe my future was something I could build with patience and planning. My husband, Ethan Pierce, used to work part-time at a boutique fitness studio. He liked the vibe, the music, the compliments, the feeling that he was the kind of man who could walk into a room and leave people smiling. We met in college, married young, 6 years together, and for a while. It was good. Not perfect, but good enough to feel safe. Then 2 years ago, Ethan announced he needed to find himself. It was said casually, like he was switching majors again. I'm burnt out, he told me, leaning back on our couch like he was delivering a TED Talk. I need space to reset, figure out my purpose. I didn't love it, but I supported him. That was my first mistake. At first, the spending was small, new outfits, self-care subscriptions, a few dinners that were just a little too expensive for a man with no paycheck. He'd come home carrying glossy shopping bags like trophies and kiss my cheek like he'd brought home groceries. You look happy, I'd say. I am happy, he'd answer. Don't you want me happy? Of course I did. So I swallowed the little alarms in my head, told myself it was temporary, a phase, a season. Then the joint account started draining faster than it should have. Not by hundreds, by thousands. One night we were watching TV, some dumb reality show where people screamed about trust while lying to each other, and I finally said it. Ethan, we need to talk about money. He didn't look up from his phone. I'm seeing charges I don't recognize. He scrolled, thumb moving like my words were background noise. I'm just treating myself a little, he said. You're so uptight about everything. I'm not uptight, I'm concerned. We're supposed to be saving. We talked about a house. That got his attention. He turned his head slowly, eyes half-lidded with annoyance, like I was a child asking why the sky was blue. We'll figure it out, he said. You always do. There it was. That phrase. You always do. It became his solution for everything. Bills piling up. I'd figure it out. Car needs repairs. I'd figure it out. He wanted a weekend trip because he needed a change of scenery. I'd figure it out. And here's the worst part. I did. Because I loved him. Because I didn't want conflict. Because I told myself that marriage meant picking up slack when the other person fell behind. But slack implies effort will return. Ethan wasn't falling behind. He was floating and letting me drown. About 8 months ago, the first credit card statement arrived that I didn't recognize. It came in the mail, old-fashioned paper, a clean envelope with a bank logo in the corner. I assumed it was junk, pre-approval garbage, marketing. Then another came, and another. Capital One, Chase, American Express, Discover. At first, I left them stacked on the counter, waiting for Ethan to deal with them. He'd sweep them into a drawer without opening them, like if he didn't look at the numbers, they couldn't be real. One afternoon, curiosity turned into dread. I opened one. My stomach dropped so hard I felt it in my throat. A balance, $8,400. And the name on the statement wasn't mine. It was Ethan Pierce. I sat at the kitchen table, paper in my hands, and I remember thinking, this can't be right. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe it's a scam. But the account number looked real. The transactions looked real. Restaurants, clothing stores, weekend hotel deposits, a men's skincare clinic I didn't even know existed. When Ethan came home, he was humming. He tossed his keys in the bowl like we were still living in the version of our marriage where nothing could crack. Hey, he said brightly, I found this amazing little place for brunch tomorrow. Ethan, I cut in, holding up the statement. My voice didn't shake the way I expected. It came out flat. What is this? He barely glanced at it. Oh, he said. I opened a few cards. We needed them for expenses. Expenses? I repeated. This is $8,000 on one card. How many do you have? He shrugged, like I'd asked how many pairs of socks he owned. I don't know, like 4 or 5. I stared at him. Why didn't you tell me? He exhaled, annoyed now, like my question was the problem. Because you get like this, he said. You make everything a big deal. A big deal? My hands tightened around the paper. You're building debt. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and swung it over his shoulder. I'm going to Sophie's, he said. Sophie was one of his friends, always laughing, always taking pictures, always living like consequences were for other people. I can't deal with your negativity right now. And he walked out. That was the moment something shifted in me. Not a dramatic snap, not fury, not screaming. It was quieter, colder, like a door inside my chest closing, not out of hate, but out of self-preservation. That night, after he left, I did what I always do when something feels wrong. I gathered evidence. First, I pulled my credit report. I expected to see damage, accounts I hadn't opened, inquiries I didn't authorize. I expected betrayal in black and white. But my report was clean, perfect. My score hadn't moved, which should have relieved me. Instead, it made my stomach twist because it meant something else. It meant Ethan hadn't dragged me down with him. He'd built a crater under his own feet. Every card was in his name. His social security number, his claimed income, his signature somewhere on every application. And in that realization was something sharp and terrifying. If the building collapsed, it would fall on him, not me. I sat in the dark living room, laptop open, the glow reflecting off my hands like I was back at work chasing a breach. And I realized Ethan didn't understand systems. He didn't understand consequences. He understood vibes. He understood charm. And he believed that because I had always cleaned up the mess, I always would. Over the next few months, more statements arrived. I watched them pile up like snowdrifts. Ethan would toss them aside and groan loudly. Ugh, credit card companies are so annoying with their spam. That's not spam, I said once. Those are bills. He waved me off. Whatever, I'll deal with it later. He never dealt with it. And I didn't rescue him. Not this time. I kept the joint account funded with just enough for my half of rent and utilities. The rest of my paycheck? I moved it. Quietly. Carefully. I opened a separate account he didn't know about. Different bank, different login, no shared access. I redirected my direct deposit like it was a classified operation. When Ethan noticed the joint account was lower, he confronted me in the kitchen while he was unpacking yet another shopping bag. Why is there less money? He demanded. I didn't blink. My hours got cut, I lied. And he believed it, because Ethan never once looked at my pay stubs. He never once asked details. He just assumed the world would keep producing for him. Meanwhile, his spending got worse. Nordstrom bags, Sephora bags, designer boutiques, expensive brunches with friends that ended up on social media with captions like living my best life and manifesting abundance. One Saturday, I came home to find him unboxing a pair of shoes with a price tag that made my brain short-circuit. Ethan, I said, my voice tight, where is this money coming from? He winked at me. I have my ways, he said. Don't worry, babe. You focus on your little computer job. I'll handle the fun stuff. My little computer job. The job paying our rent, groceries, electricity, internet, every quiet necessity Ethan treated like it happened by magic. I stood there watching him admire himself in the mirror, and I noticed something I hadn't wanted to notice before. He wasn't just spending, he was performing. As if he needed an audience to convince himself he was still winning. And lately, that audience included someone I hadn't heard about in years. Madison, his ex-girlfriend. At first it was tiny things, her name popping up in his notifications, a laugh when he'd tilt his phone away, she just liked my post, said too quickly, too casually. It wasn't proof of cheating. Not yet. But it was proof of secrecy. And secrecy in a marriage is never an innocent hobby. By the time the 8th month rolled around, the stack of unopened statements on our counter looked like a monument to denial. And Ethan still walked through our apartment like a man who believed he was untouchable. Like a man who believed I would always figure it out. He didn't realize I already had. He just didn't know what I'd figured out, or what I was about to let happen, when the system he built finally did what systems always do. It caught up. The first time I heard the word declined in our story, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a courtroom slam. It wasn't a screaming match. It was just the sound of a plastic card rejected by a machine in a grocery store, followed by Ethan's voice, shaky and too loud, on the phone. Maya, something's wrong. I was sitting at my desk, 3 monitors open, threat logs scrolling like rain. At work, I dealt with systems failing all the time. When a firewall misbehaved, when a server went down, there was always a reason. People, though, people always acted surprised by the consequences they built with their own hands. What's wrong? I asked, already knowing. My card, his breath hitched. It got declined. I tried again. Declined. I tried another one. All of them. I was literally at checkout. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my face neutral, even though something in my chest tightened. Not satisfaction, not joy, just a heavy sense of inevitability. All of them? I repeated calmly. Yes! He sounded frantic now. What is happening? Did you move money? Did you freeze something? I almost laughed at that. He still believed I was the one holding the strings, even when the strings were tied around his own wrists. Did you pay the bills? I asked. There was a pause so long I could hear the air moving on the line. I thought you were paying them, he whispered. I stared at the wall behind my monitors, the same dull gray I'd stared at through months of small disappointments. Why would I pay bills on cards I don't have access to, Ethan? Because you... His voice cracked, then hardened, as if anger could save him from embarrassment. Because you always handle the money stuff. I handle our money stuff, I said. Those cards are yours, in your name, your responsibility. He exhaled sharply, like I was being unreasonable. But I don't know how to deal with credit card companies. That's exactly why you shouldn't have opened 6 of them. 6? He sounded offended. I opened 4. I count 6 different statements that come here monthly, I said, ticking them off in my mind like a list of security breaches. Capital One, Chase, Discover, American Express, Citi, Bank of America. Silence. Then, smaller. Oh, you forgot about a couple? He didn't answer. He hung up on me, like I was the one who had done something wrong. When I got home that evening, the apartment felt different. Not because anything had changed physically. Same couch, same framed photos we'd taken on a trip to Chicago years ago, same throw blanket he insisted made our place feel cozy. But the air had shifted. Ethan was sitting on the floor with his laptop open, papers spread around him like he was studying for a final, except the subject was his own life collapsing. He looked up when I walked in, eyes glossy, cheeks red. I've been on hold for 2 hours, he said hoarsely. 2 hours, Maya. They keep transferring me. I set my bag down slowly. Yeah, I said. They do that. He tried to laugh, but it came out broken. I told them you'd call, he blurted, like confession could earn him rescue. I told one of them my wife manages the finances and you'd call to set up a payment plan. I stared at him. You told them I'd call. He flinched under my tone. I didn't know what else to say, he insisted. They were asking questions. They were threatening stuff. Then you should answer their questions, I said, truthfully. Ethan's face twisted as if the word truth hurt his mouth. You're acting like I did this on purpose, he snapped. I let the silence sit there for a second, heavy and honest. You opened 6 credit cards without telling me, I said quietly. You maxed them out. You ignored every bill. You thought I would pay them because it's easier for you to assume I'll clean up the mess than it is for you to be accountable. His eyes flashed. I was building credit. No, I corrected. You were building a fantasy. He stood up abruptly, like movement could replace logic. I'm not a bad person, he said, voice rising. I'm not some criminal. I just needed help. I've been stressed. Being stressed doesn't make debt appear, I said. Your choices did. For a second, he looked like he might cry again. Then the tears dried up as quickly as they came. Anger was easier. Anger felt like power. So you're really just going to watch me drown? He demanded. That's your plan? Be cold and smug? I looked at him. At the man I married. The man who had once brought me coffee during late-night study sessions in college, who had written me a note on our first anniversary that said, I love how safe you make me feel. And I realized something that made my throat tighten. He didn't want safety. He wanted someone else to absorb the impact of his recklessness. He wanted a human shock absorber. Drowning is when someone falls into water, I said softly. Ethan, you built this pool. You filled it. You jumped in. He stared at me like he couldn't understand why his charm wasn't working anymore. The next few days were chaos. Ethan spent hours on the phone, pacing the apartment, switching between tears and pleading and forced laughter. I heard him promise impossible payments. I heard him tell strangers, I'm a good guy, like it was a currency. I heard him blame unexpected expenses without naming a single one. And I heard him say my name. Yeah, my wife will handle it. Yeah, my wife is better with numbers. Yeah, my wife... Every time, it was like he was trying to swipe me like a credit card. But I stayed silent. I went to work. I came home. I ate dinner. I watched him unravel. Then the certified letter came. It arrived on a Thursday. The mail carrier knocked because it required a signature. I signed my name with a steady hand and carried it inside like a sealed warning. I set it on the counter and said nothing. Ethan saw the envelope that evening and tore it open without even taking his shoes off. I watched his face change in real time. First confusion, then fear, then something close to horror. They're suing me, he whispered. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, not as a performance, but because I needed my body to hold itself together. Who? I asked, though I could already guess. He held out the letter with trembling hands. Chase. $14,200 plus interest and legal fees. How can they sue me? He said, voice thin. I mean, it's just credit cards. That's exactly what they can sue you for, I said. He looked up, eyes wild. But I don't have $14,000. I know. For a second, he seemed to wait, like my next line should be, but I do, and I'll fix it. When it didn't come, his face tightened. Well, can't you help me? He demanded. And there it was again. The expectation. The entitlement disguised as desperation. I walked to my laptop on the table and closed it slowly, like ending a meeting. No, I said. Ethan blinked. What do you mean, no? I mean, no, I repeated. I'm not paying your debt. His mouth fell open, as if he'd never considered the possibility of hearing that word from me. Maya, I'm your husband, he said, voice rising. Those are our credit cards, our debt, your legal responsibility. They're not my cards, I said evenly. I'm not co-signed on any of them. That's not the point, he snapped. We're married. We're supposed to help each other. I stepped closer, my voice still calm, but sharper now, like a blade being unsheathed. Help is when someone admits they made a mistake and asks you to stand with them, I said. What you're asking for is a bailout with no accountability. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my tone stopped him. Then I watched his eyes narrow as a new thought formed. How do you know the balances? He asked slowly. I didn't answer immediately. I let him sit in it, because he deserved to feel it. I can count, I said finally. I've seen every statement that has come through this door for 8 months. His face went pale. You've been watching? I've been paying attention, I corrected. Someone had to. He took a step back, like the truth was a physical force. Then he did what Ethan always did when cornered. He tried to rewrite the story. This is insane, he hissed. You're acting like I'm abusing you. You're acting like I'm some villain. I looked at him for a long moment. Ethan, I said quietly, you treated me like an ATM. You dismissed my work, spent like our life was a game, and when the game ended, you expected me to cover your losses. He shook his head, eyes bright with rage and shame. You're enjoying this, he accused. That one hurt in a way I didn't expect, because the truth was I wasn't enjoying anything. I was grieving. Grieving the version of my marriage where love meant something steady and mutual. Grieving the man I thought Ethan was. But grief didn't change reality. Reality was still on that paper. Reality was still in his name. And reality was about to get louder. The next escalation came faster than I expected. A week later, Ethan's bank account got frozen. He called me at work, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. They froze my account, he shouted. I can't access my money. What money, Ethan? I said, voice flat. Your account has been overdrawn for 2 months. That's not the point, he snapped. How am I supposed to live? The question almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so revealing. The same way you've been living, I said. Off my income. There was a long silence. Then his voice dropped low and cold. I'm going to call my dad, he said. I felt something icy slide down my spine. His father was a man who gave advice like he gave gifts, loudly, publicly, and usually without actually paying for anything. The man who'd borrowed money from us before and never paid it back. The man who always had opinions about what a wife should do, while never living up to what a husband should be. He'll give me money, Ethan continued, confidence returning like a mask snapping into place. And then we're going to pay off these cards and you're going to owe me a huge apology. I stared at my computer screen, the office humming around me, and realized Ethan hadn't learned anything. He still thought rescue was guaranteed, still thought accountability was optional, still thought shame could be flipped into blame if he spoke loud enough. Good luck with that, I said. And I hung up. That night his dad did call. And when I saw the name on my screen, I didn't feel fear. I felt something steadier, prepared, because I knew what was coming. And this time, I wasn't going to figure it out for them. Not anymore. Ethan's father didn't waste time on pleasantries. The moment I answered the phone, his voice came through sharp and offended, like I'd personally insulted him. Maya, he said, drawing out my name. My son tells me you're refusing to help him with some credit card debt. That's correct, I said. There was a pause, just long enough for him to recalibrate his approach. That's not very wife-like, he replied. Marriage means supporting each other, especially when things get hard. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, staring at the faint coffee stain Ethan had promised to clean 3 weeks ago. Neither is spending $65,000 without telling your spouse, I said calmly. The silence on the other end was immediate and thick. 65, he repeated. Ethan said it was maybe 10, 15 at most. He lied, I said. You're welcome to ask for the statements. His breath hitched. I could hear him processing, recalculating, probably trying to figure out which version of the story he wanted to believe. Then, without another word, he hung up. 2 days later, Ethan moved out. There was no screaming, no dramatic exit, no apology. He packed 2 suitcases, avoided my eyes, and said, I'm staying with my mom until you come to your senses. I didn't stop him. I didn't ask him to stay. I just watched the door close behind him and felt tired. Not broken, not hysterical. Just exhausted in the way you feel when you finally accept that something you've been carrying for years was never meant to be yours. For 3 days, the apartment was quiet. Then his mother called. Unlike her ex-husband, Linda Pierce had always been grounded, practical, the kind of woman who asked questions before forming conclusions. Maya, she said gently, I'm not calling to take sides. I need to understand what's happening. So I told her everything. The quitting, the spending, the cards, the unopened statements, the lawsuits, the frozen accounts. I explained it like I would explain a system failure, step by step, no emotion attached, just facts. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. That's not what Ethan told us. I closed my eyes. What did he say? She hesitated. He said you gambled away your savings, she admitted, that he had to open credit cards to keep you both afloat, that you were unstable with money. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurd it almost felt surreal. I've never gambled in my life, I said, but I can prove that if you'd like. Yes, she said quickly. Please. I sent everything. Screenshots of my separate account, $32,000 saved. Our joint account showing my consistent deposits and his massive withdrawals. Credit card statements in Ethan's name only. Dates, amounts, patterns. An hour later, Linda called back. Her voice was different, quieter. He lied to us, she said. I'm so sorry. You don't have to apologize, I replied. He's your son. There was a pause. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm filing for divorce, I said. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just sighed, like someone who had been waiting for a truth to land. I understand, she said softly. The papers were filed the next morning. 3 days after that, Ethan was served. He called immediately. He was hysterical. You're divorcing me over money? He shouted. Are you serious right now? I'm divorcing you over lies, I said. Over disrespect, over financial abuse. The money is just the evidence trail. Financial abuse? He scoffed. You're unbelievable. You spent $65,000, told me I'd figure it out, refused to work, and lied to your parents about why your life is collapsing, I said. Yes, financial abuse. He hung up. My lawyer says the divorce will be straightforward. The debt is entirely in his name. I'm not liable for a cent. Ethan is living with his mother now. According to mutual friends, he's working retail and still insists I'm the villain, that I trapped him, that I set him up, that I abandoned him when he needed help. No one who knows me believes that. Linda reached out again last week. She told me Ethan had a complete breakdown when a second lawsuit arrived, that she sat him down and explained something he'd never fully grasped before, that consequences exist. I'm moving into a smaller apartment next month. My credit is intact, my savings are untouched, and for the first time in years, I can breathe. Because love doesn't mean being someone's financial parent. And partnership isn't built on the promise that one person will always clean up the other's mess. The quiet after someone leaves is different from ordinary silence. It doesn't echo, it doesn't hum. It just exists, like a pause the universe insists you sit with. For the first few nights after Ethan moved out, I kept expecting the sound of keys at the door, the casual thud of his shoes, the familiar careless question, "What's for dinner?" It never came. Instead, what came were notifications, emails, letters, consequences arriving one by one, addressed very clearly to him. 3 days after the divorce papers were served, Ethan called again. This time there was no rage in his voice, just panic. They're coming after me from another card, he said, words tumbling over each other. Another lawsuit. I don't understand how this got so bad so fast. I closed my eyes. It didn't get bad fast, I said. It got bad quietly. You just weren't listening. There was a pause. Then, softer, you could still help me. I felt something settle in my chest. Firm, resolved. No, I said, I won't. Not because I hated him, but because helping him now would only teach him the same lie he'd always believed. That charm could override responsibility, and that someone else would always absorb the damage. After that call, I stopped answering. I let my lawyer handle communication. I let the process move forward exactly as it was meant to, and it was clean. No hidden accounts, no shared debt, no legal tricks. Just paperwork quietly confirming what I already knew. I was free. Ethan, meanwhile, was unraveling. Mutual friends filled in the gaps without being asked. He was working at a retail store, complaining constantly, telling anyone who would listen that I had changed, that I was cold, that I'd abandoned him when he needed support. Some people nodded politely. Most didn't buy it, because the truth has a way of leaving fingerprints. Linda called me one last time. I don't expect forgiveness, she said, but I wanted you to know. He's starting to understand. Too late, maybe, but he's starting to understand. What changed? I asked. She exhaled. When the second lawsuit arrived, she said, and he realized there was no one left to blame. I pictured him then, not as the confident man he pretended to be online, but as someone finally facing the math of his choices. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt closure. A month later, I signed the lease on a smaller apartment. Less space, less noise, less pretending. On move-in day, I stood in the empty living room, sunlight spilling across bare floors, and realized something simple but powerful. Peace doesn't need to be loud. My savings are still mine. My credit is still perfect. My future feels quiet and intentional. People have asked if I feel guilty. I don't. I gave Ethan time, space, warnings. 6 full months to stop, to come clean, to try. He chose denial. Others ask if I ever loved him. Of course I did. But love doesn't mean erasing yourself to keep someone comfortable. It doesn't mean becoming a financial safety net for someone who refuses to stand on their own. That's not partnership. That's parenthood. And I didn't sign up to be anyone's mother. For the first time in years, my life feels like mine again. And that's worth more than any apology he never learned how to give.